My name is Ariana, and I'm a reporter for Education Week, where I cover students and their well-being. In this session, we're going to explore what educators can learn from athletes, in particular in teaching social emotional skills, those all-important non-academic skills like resilience, setting goals, and managing your emotions. These are skills that elite athletes must hone and perfect, often at a young age, in order to compete. Social emotional learning and how to instill those skills in students is a pretty important topic right now, because educators have been trying to lead and teach their students through this incredibly difficult time, a pandemic that has upended education the world over. Joining us for this session is Steve Messler, a three-time Olympian and gold medal winner in the four-man bobsled. Steve is on the board of the United States Olympic and Paralympic Committee. He is also the founder of the nonprofit Classroom Champions, which connects athletes with schools to help students build social emotional skills. Lex Gillette is a long and triple jumper who is also totally blind. He is a four-time Paralympic medalist, most recently winning the gold in the long jump in 2019 at the Track and Field World Championships. And finally, we have Jennifer Reguth, who's a fourth grade teacher at the Margaret R. Brown Elementary School in Seymour, Indiana. Jennifer, as the teacher on the panel, could you start with describing some of the challenges your students have been struggling with over the course of the pandemic?
Sure, I'd be happy to. Just to give you a visual at school, just imagine kids holding everything at an arm's length and eating an arm's length apart in the cafeteria. That's sort of the setting that you would see and what the kids are used to, but mentally that does things to you also because you have to stay apart from everyone. And long term, they're hanging on. It's been a long time since they can't socialize with their friends. They can't go out to do the things they want. Their families maybe don't go anywhere. So the kids are on it for the long haul, and we're just trying to find our way through it and find ways to help them.
And so, Steve and Lex, I want to turn to you guys. What has been some of the most important social and emotional skills that each of you have developed as athletes that you've really found yourself leaning into during the pandemic? Steve, we'll go ahead and start with you.
Well, I mean, first of all, thank you, Ariana, for hosting today, and Jen for taking time out of what is, I know, a crazy schedule for teachers these days and juggling in school and out of school and your virtual remote learners. And Lex is taking time away from training today. So thank you, Lex, for taking that. You got Tokyo is now like 6 months away at this point. For me, I think it's hard sometimes to recognize what the skills are that I'm using. It's kind of like part and parcel. It's like asking, it's like asking a third grader, when did they learn how to add? Like, you develop these skills and then you become successful with them as an athlete, and all of a sudden they just become the things you do. But I think for me, a big part of what I'm finding really useful for me is process. Not necessarily routine, but process, which for me is like helps ground me in a bit of a sanity of like patterns. I don't like to think about it as routine, because routines, like if you miss one day, then you've messed up your routine and then you kind of wallow in that. But for me, it's finding process to, whether it's, taking joy in like the way that like I grind beans and make coffee, or whether it is, or it's the way that I like get myself ready to work, especially considering, locked in my house and haven't been able to do anything like that. And I think that's really kept me grounded through all of this. How about you, Lex? I'm totally curious to hear this one, Ariana.
Thanks, Steve. And want to echo Steve's sentiments. Really appreciate being on the panel, and you all are phenomenal. Really proud to be here today. I think that the biggest one would probably be managing emotions. So when you think about training for the games, you're thinking that you're going to be on that plane going to Tokyo in August of 2020. And in March of 2020, you get the news that the games aren't going to happen when you expect them to. And so for me as an athlete, I'm really big into visualization and imagery and seeing myself doing exactly what I want to do. I see myself achieving what I want to achieve. So I saw myself on that plane heading to Tokyo and and being inside of that stadium on the first day of track and field, the evening session. So there's bright lights and so many people inside of the stadium. I was scheduled to compete on that first night. So I am already taking myself to that space in training in March, April, and May. But of course, once we got the news that the games would be postponed, all of that kind of felt like the finish line was being placed further away. And then I also think about, for me, I am a blind athlete, so I train with a guide on a daily basis, which means that I have someone who is running side by side with me as I train. He's making sure that I get in the highest level of work. He's there with me in the weight room. We're really good friends, and at this point, we're family members. So when you think about the pandemic and the stay-at-home orders that were put in place, we couldn't train together, and at certain points, I wasn't able to train at all. So now I'm in this space where I'm a highly competitive athlete, and I'm so used to being out there on the field of play and sharpening my craft and getting better on a daily basis. I'm not able to do that. And then when we were actually able to get back out there and train again, I couldn't train with my guide because there wasn't much information around the pandemic. We knew that you had to be at least 6 feet away from each other, and you have to be really careful. We weren't able to train the same as we would normally, and that definitely had a lot of toll on me from a mental standpoint. Fortunately now we're able to kind of push toward the goal of going to the games, and we'll see how that unravels. But really trying to stay in that neutral space from an emotional standpoint, because you could really be in this place where you're really down.
Yeah, I'm wondering how, I actually want to follow up on that. Managing emotions is a really big part of social emotional learning. And it's a tough one for a lot of students right now. There's a lot of big emotions, a lot of stressors. So how do you take your experiences, Lex, and maybe Jennifer and Steve can weigh in on this? How do you take your experiences and translate that into something that students can understand, that school children can understand in terms of managing emotions? What tools do they need to actually make that happen?
I think, if I can jump in, we see it a lot within Classroom Champions. I think we've been able to really hold on to what we do as athlete mentors and the teachers, everyone. And so to be a lot more clear, it's been a lot of that connection and being able to relate to each other, to be vulnerable, to open up and be transparent about what you're feeling and what you're going through at this time, and let the kids know that, hey, I'm right there with you.
Excellent. Yeah, that's and Jennifer, so I think that Lex mentioned something really important, which was adults showing students that it's okay to have tough emotions. Is that something that you found is helpful in your classroom?
I remember this one morning going down to a meeting for the PLC, Professional Learning Community, and I got overwhelmed while I was in there because they were like, we need to do this, we haven't done this, we haven't that. So I was tearing up when I came back to the classroom. Immediately, all the kids just froze, and they're watching. They're like, what's the matter? Are you all right? Like, they're tuning in too. So I was like, you know what? I was just at this meeting, and I got overwhelmed because I have a to-do list that's way too long. So I'm just going to take some deep breaths. I'm going to take a drink of water and change my mind and start working on something else. So in real life modeling, not like made up teacher modeling, but there have been moments like that. And the kids watch you to see what you're going to do. And hopefully it's sinking in next time. I remember she did that. Maybe I could, stop myself, take a breath. And then one of them would try to give me a hug, and you can't get real close, but they all had their ways of trying to help me out, which made me try harder. But anyway, it worked out in the end.
Yeah, I hear you say that, and it is the role modeling side is so important. That's been one of the theses at Classroom Champions has been like getting good people in front of kids, seeing those people that there's a process to, and not meaning to bring up process again, but that was the whole thing. Like Lee and I, my sister, my co-founder and I, like we wanted to show kids there's a process, And it's not the gray-haired, people who like me who are a decade beyond their sport. It's the people like Lex who are in it. And so just like Jen was sharing her process in the moment with her students, like that's been the thing that we've wanted to do from the beginning. And that's why I think, like, yes, I'm clearly biased. I was an athlete and, we leverage sport at Classroom Champions, but sport's demonstrable. Kids don't have like Jen had said, like kids are still developing their metacognitive abilities and skills. They're not quite ready to think about their thought process yet. That's
really interesting. And I want to talk now about motivation being a really big issue for a lot of students, a lot of educators, really all of us. It's been hard for students to stay motivated through these really incredibly difficult times with a lot of changes. I mean, whether they're in classroom, in person, maybe switching to hybrid or virtual schedule. And Jennifer, I'm curious, what have you seen in your school right now? We're entering into almost 1 year of the pandemic in the United States. What is student motivation looking like right now?
We're all just figuring it out together. And then I think once we got settled in together and there was a routine and we kind of understood it, people started calm down a little bit and think about how this is going to work. So, they come in tired and they come in sometimes thinking, I got to do this again. I have to wear this mask again. So it goes in waves, I feel like, but they get in there with their.
Has it normalized yet, Jen?
I has for me. I mean, I'm very aware of it, and the kids just know it. It doesn't stop them from grouping up like it's in line for the bathroom. If I had a penny, please hold your arm out. But nonetheless, it's normalized for them pretty much. There's not too much trouble trying to get them to do their mask and stay apart. I have noticed they're a little more dependent on like the teacher in the room. Like I probably do way more out loud and together than I had, because we used to be able to do small group at a table and I could get this bunch and I could talk to them close up, and it's sort of back to that old school, you're at the overhead, they're sitting down, just because you can't group up as well. There's not enough plexiglass. I'm sure every teacher has their own situation with that. And I miss that. And you're closer to them, literally, like physically, but also like you're reading cues and you're seeing where they're frustrated and what they don't write down and what they have questions about. Overall, kids really are resilient though. I mean, they live in all kinds of situations and they show up. And for the most part, if I get really energetic and pretend it's the best idea, they go along with it. Even if it's not their favorite, they'll be like, okay, she seems to be happy, let's just do that. So I think it goes in waves.
That's interesting that it goes in waves, that it's not just been this decline, but that it's a bit more dynamic. That's interesting.
Yeah.
I want to put to Steve, I think that there are a lot of times regular people like me, we think about elite athletes, Olympians. There's this perception that you have to be extremely motivated, 100% focused every second of every day. And I'm wondering if that's accurate. Are athletes more motivated than regular people, or are athletes better at overcoming a lack of motivation? If you could speak to me about a time when maybe your motivation has wavered. And
I think you kind of filled it in. No, I mean, I think I am definitely a normal person now. There was a time I look back at the old me, it feels like, it feels like a separate thing. And I'm trying to rediscover that in some ways in my life right now. You hit the nail on the head in the second half of that for sure, which is, I don't know if athletes, whether you're an Olympian or whether you're Paralympian or whether you're, a pro athlete, are more motivated. I think we have learned, and I do think this is a learned skill, that our actions have consequences. So that's really, really empowering. And that in of itself is motivating. So I think people see motivation as this thing that's just in them. Either I'm a motivated individual or I'm motivated about this task or that task. And that's what keeps my energy going. I think what we've learned is that our actions have consequences. And I learned that when I was a kid. I was 11 years old. I went to Junior Olympic Nationals, my first year doing track and field, and I got like 13th place at the summer nationals. And I was like, wow, I'm awesome. The next summer, 12 years old, did terrible, made it to national meet in like one relay, but nothing by myself. And I remember going home and asking my dad, what did I do? Like, what should I do? And my dad like went to the library because it was 1990 something. And found a book on plyometrics, which are jumping exercises, came back and mind you, a 12-year-old should not be doing plyometrics, but neither here nor there back then. And I wound up going out, this little 12-year-old kid, and he made these little boxes, and I grew up in Buffalo, so cold in the wintertime and in the off season. And my job was to bounce back and forth between these boxes. And I would do 100-foot contacts Monday, Wednesday, Friday. And eventually he didn't have to tell me anymore to go out there, because I started seeing it on the soccer field, in the indoor soccer field, and on the track. And I started seeing myself do that. And I think I was lucky that I learned at 11 years old or 12 years old that if I do something else will happen. So I think that's where athletes kind of do separate themselves. And you see that in high performing business people and everybody else that has reached certain things, is actions have consequences. You learn that. And that, whether, I don't really like to call that motivation, because I think it confuses the process a little bit of that. I don't know, Lex, like, what do you think? Does that sit with you?
You hit the nail on the head as you were talking. I was thinking about, I mean, both of us compete in sports that are very objective. Like the clock doesn't lie, the tape measure doesn't lie. You go out there, you run, you jump, is going to give you a result. And so when you think about it from that perspective, like when I'm having these days where I'm not the most motivated, what gets me out there is the fact that I know that if I don't get out here and lift these weights or do these box jumps or do these repeat 120-meter sprints, then the likelihood of me getting good results in the sport and ultimately getting on the top of the podium, probably it reduces. Yeah, I mean, I'm totally on the same page. Like I have to get out there and make sure that I'm getting the results that I want.
Jen, what grade are you teaching right now?
Fourth grade. They're about 9.
Grade still. Like a fourth grader, their goal won't happen for 15 years. Like, how do you think of trying to motivate somebody whose goal is 15 years away, AKA having a job or a sustainable life?
Right.
Same thing for an athlete. Like, you got to wake up today, even though the Olympics are 3 years away, and you have to understand that your actions today have consequences. And that's why I think sport is such a great parallel for kids to learn.
Jennifer, if you could, how do you translate sort of these lessons and motivation from athletes to school children? What are sort of the main takeaways in terms of actually taking steps to improve motivation?
Right. It's hard for, like Steve said, for kids to think about thinking. So having something concrete that they can relate to. So I think it is true. Steve and Lex are athletes, and they might not be on the best soccer team or whatever, but they go to recess and they got to climb the equipment and play with the stuff that's out there. So I think that's very relatable. As far as motivation too, like Lex overcoming his blindness or dealing with it, however you want to say it, to become successful was amazing. Steve had injuries that he had, and you're able to say that to kids. Look, Emily Cook broke both of her ankles, and she still fought back and got a medal. So those concrete things for them are a good way to do it. So it's like if you weren't great at math and you studied this and this for 5 nights and then you get it, then you can see progress. So even though they write out long-term goals, Steve, there's always the short-term ones. There's just like 3 little ones to get to your long-term, but we always set a short-term one that's pretty short, and sometimes as a class, so that they go, oh, it did. She made us do these math tables like 8 times, but man, I can do it my 7s much faster. So they can see it that way. Long-term is really hard for any of them, and they think Steve and Lex just were magical when they were teenagers, and that's why they got to be Olympians. When they get these videos and they talk to them and they get to meet with Lex online and hear his story, they're like, oh man, he really had to work to get there. He just didn't show up one day. So that's how it all becomes. The live video chats are amazing, and that's how it becomes relatable. Hear someone else's story, understand they just didn't show up one day, and try to work in your life as best you can with your situation.
I love hearing that. That's like literally when we founded the organization. That was like literally the conversation that caused Classroom Champions to become a thing, is like exactly what you said, Jen. So that makes my day.
I think
that's why I say thank you all the time. That's why I'm always like, you guys, I don't know from our end. Lex got to come and check it out and feel the vibes and know what it's all about. Lex, remember when you were visited, and those kids
Absolutely.
they were crazy.
One of
They
the
thought
best,
they were.
one of the best days of my life.
I love that because it was one of mine. But those kids like think Lex is their best friend. They watch those videos. We talk about him. Here's what happened. Here's what you're gonna do. Video chat. And the day he came, literally, they thought they already knew him. So, Steve, what you're saying is true, and that's why I'm so grateful all the time. These stories, like I'm talking about, and using concrete evidence from the athletes that we have who are real people, motivate the kids.
I want to turn to this topic of developing resilience. And Alex, I want to ask you about your experience. You lost your eyesight as a child and have gone on to become a Paralympic. What are the lessons on building resilience that you can take from your experience that you can impart to teachers to impart to their students?
Yeah. So to give a little more context, I was 8 years old when I started experiencing retina detachments, and that led to a string of 10 operations that I had that year that I was 8. And after the last operation, doctors basically said that there was nothing else they could do to help my sight, and they said that I would eventually become blind. And that was a gradual process. After I received that news, it was go home, go through your normal routine, go to sleep at night, wake up the next morning, and each day you see a little less than what you do the day before, until one day you finally wake up and you can't see anything. So I mean, it's a total understatement when I say that it was challenging. But what really helped me is I had have a phenomenal mom, and she allowed me to get through that grieving process, to understand that this is going to be your life now, but we're going to figure out a way to get you back on the right path, to get you on the right track. And my mom was committed to finding as many resources and tools and programs and phenomenal people as possible to help me overcome that, and to help me see that I was still valuable, and I could still go into the world and do amazing things. I would say that the two biggest things that really helped me the most is the fact that I was connected with people who provided a safe space for me to figure things out, and to also to fail. And they taught me early on that failing is not, it's okay. Like, it's okay to fall down. It's okay to fail. You're not going to be perfect. You're going to make mistakes. And establishing that early was very important. I would say. I think that my personal beliefs are that a lot of the external factors that we have right now in society in certain areas want us to believe that you have to be perfect and you have to do everything correctly all the time. But that's just not true. So people gave me that space to fail and to learn from those failures, most importantly. And then I would say the second thing is that I was connected to people who understood that I learned differently. I lived a different experience. And so when I think about that, I think about being in a classroom, and all kids don't learn the same. And that's the joy of having phenomenal teachers like Jen, who understand that. And she's definitely someone who's versatile. And some kids may be able to learn point a certain way, and some kids may learn that same point differently. And so her having different teaching styles and being able to reach home and make sure that all of the kids are learning, even though they have different learning styles, is huge. And so for me, as a blind child, there were definitely a lot of times where I I learned differently. I capture information differently, but I was connected to people who understood that, and they always figured out ways to make accommodations and adjustments so that I didn't fall behind the curve.
So I think it's really interesting what you said, that an important part of resilience was having a safe space and having adults in your life who could give you that safe space. Steve, do you want to weigh in on this? What are some concrete tools for building resilience that you learned as an athlete?
I think that, I mean, the concept of failing forward or fail fast and fail forward were the best ways for me as an athlete. I mean, I started bobsledding, which wound up being like the path for me to fulfill my dreams, because I had injuries for 5 years in college track when I was at University of Florida. That's the reason, like the depths of like sadness at the time and probably depression at the time, but in 2000, it was not a diagnosed thing. But that's what caused me to go do bobsled. So that bottom point. And then in 2006, we were supposed to medal. It wasn't if we were going to medal, it was simply what color medal we were going to get at the 2006 Olympics in 4-man bobsled. We were USA 1. We were, gold, silver, gold medals going into the World Cup, or going into the Olympics at the World Cups. And we got 7th. And that was awful and terrible. And that caused me to make changes in my life and with the team to go and have the team that we had, that was the camaraderie we had to go to the Olympics in 2010 and win the first gold medal for the US in 62 years. And then like later in my life, 7 or 8 years later, I found myself at the bottom of depression, and being able to think back and saying, okay, like these other bottom moments in my life eventually caused great things. So why shouldn't this be another point in?
That's great. And I actually, and this is my last question, Jennifer, I'd like to put to you, what have you learned about resilience this year in terms of your own work, and maybe if there's anything that your students have taught you about resilience? Let's hear from you about resilience.
Teachers are unique because you're not only taking care of yourself, but 28 other people and putting them first every day. So sometimes teachers take a back seat like that. Like Lex was saying, the gal across from me and next door to me, we try to trade things off and work like a team. And if I didn't have people next to me that I could lean on like that and get ideas from, or trade, like I'll do it this time, you do it next time, it would be, I don't know. I guess I would survive it, but I don't know what mental state I would be in. But like I was telling you at the beginning, those kids are resilient. They're living in these places that are just, chaos, and they come in, they take cues from what they see, but also from their peers. And there are always some of the people that are make it look like they're handling it like a pro, and other people that aren't. So we always try to say, what things are working. Let's try this one. Okay, if that didn't work this time, let's try another one. Let's not give up. Let's try another one. And going back to goal setting, the short term that I make them ask them to do, always is measurable. Like Lex was saying, you measure the distance you jump or how fast you go on the bobsled. It's always measurable. And that's usually why I pick math facts first, because you can say, I only did 10 in this many minutes, but I did this. It's very measurable. So they can't say like, I want to be better at reading. So that sets them up for like, I don't know, are you better at reading? So anyway, they don't give up. They're trying to do what the teachers are asking them to. And I look at that little class, and sometimes I just wait and I just look at them because I want to meet them eye to eye. And we're all in it, man. So you're in it with me. I'm in it too. Some days it goes completely smoothly. Some days my desk is piled high. That's usually it's piled high, but they understand me. But they're ready. I check on them first thing in the morning when they come through the door. Are their eyes up? How are they greeting? What kind of a mood are they in? And I try to address that first, because no one cares about learning if you have so many emotional things going on or things coming in from home. So even if you just take a quick minute to address that, like over the desk, you all right? You need to talk? You want to write something down? I'm going to take the lap, come back. You've got to give them enough space. So it would make it even a more sterile environment if they just walked in and you were demanding, here's the math worksheet, have this done. Make sure you have this done on time, because the human side of it is what makes it what it is. It makes teaching, and that's how Classroom Champions has. And I get reminded of my skills every time they put that out. I've done this for several years now. I'm like, yes, okay, that's good. And another athlete will say just one different little thing, and we just try to pick up on it. And so the kids will mention it. So as much as I'm giving to them, they're giving back to me. If I need a quiet moment and they look up, they just know. So I appreciate that about them. But teaching them to identify what they're feeling, and then taking steps to address that. And if those steps didn't work, try other steps. I think it's just like a life message.
Yeah, and I think what you said, you talked about talking to other teachers. I mean, that's something that certainly social emotional experts will tell you, they've told me time and time again, relationships are key right now. They are so, I mean, they're important always, but they are so key right now. Relationships with students having a real solid, true relationship with at least one adult in the school building, having relationships with one another, teachers having relationships with one another. This has been a great conversation. I think we could go for another 2 hours, but unfortunately we can't. So again, thank you for this fantastic discussion on what educators can learn from athletes. Thank you to Jennifer, Steve, and Lex.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thanks
everybody.
for having me.